Hey everybody, welcome to the first episode of Jono Live There, the fantastic podcast where a guy that's never lived out of California, interviews my most traveled friend, Jonathan Chan, in a time of his life where he's quarantined. Jonathan, how you doing?
I am doing great. Quarantined, but not till Monday. That'll be the first time in about 6 months that I'll be able to go out just for fucking sorry, just for no reason. Just to just go out, and not have to think about where I'm going, not have to, have a permit. And so yeah, I'm looking forward to
Yeah,
that.
Jonathan's a pretty fascinating guy. Like I met him in college, and ever since I met him, he's lived in a different place every year that I message him, and I always thought he had a fascinating life. So I find it very ironic that he's stuck in his house right now because of the quarantine. How long have you been basically not allowed to leave except for groceries and stuff?
Yeah, I'll say almost 6 months now. And it's been like that, yeah. Although honestly, I cannot be complaining at all because looking at most people here actually that have to risk their lives to earn a living and are sort of forced to follow the rules and everything. I've been lucky to be able to stay put, So yeah.
Yeah, it's good that you're keeping safe, but so that to keep you a little bit sane, Jonathan, we decided to record your memoirs right now in case something tragic happens from being alone too long. So we're trying to keep you sane by doing this podcast. And so the theme of this podcast is to interview Jonathan and talk about each of the different countries that he's lived in throughout his lifetime. Jonathan, are you excited about this?
As always, man, especially when it's you who's doing this, and gotta say it was your idea all along. So hey, I'm keen. I'm keen to deliver what valuable knowledge I may or may not have on my life.
Yeah, and thanks for doing this. I am also pretty bored, so I wanted to do something creative too. And why not talk to like one of my most interesting friends for a couple episodes? So the first country that we're going to talk about Jonathan's life is the country that he was born in, which is Malaysia. Now, Malaysia is pretty interesting to me, and a lot of actually no, actually it's not very interesting to me and a lot of Americans because we don't know much about it. Like when Americans think of Asian countries, they think of China, they think of Japan, they think of Korea. These countries that have a lot of cultural influence, a lot of immigrants that come to America. So we understand their food, we understand their music a little, we understand some of their movies. But Malaysia has always like been a country that I never really had that much thoughts about. So you want to say something that's distinctly
Uh,
Malaysian and like what makes it different from like typical, or not typical Asian countries, but the countries that Asian Americans think are typical.
well, I guess I'll start off with just with what you just said there and how, of course, having had the privilege and pleasure and honor of dating an American as well and learning sort of, on how, Americans, I
Just say
guess,
the pleasure of dating an American.
yes, to kind of get underneath and to sort of see
And she
how
had
you
no
guys
idea what Malaysia was either.
uh no, she probably did. But having said that, most people, like you said, didn't, right? And probably still might not. I'm not gonna say don't. It might not, right? And the fact that I think the closest thing to Malaysia was Thai food, and apparently, based off of her, her account, is that when you guys refer to, anything that's sort of anything kind of Southeast Asian, apart from Vietnamese, it's either it's either Vietnamese or Thai. And
Yeah,
so,
Thai food is basically covering every cuisine
yeah,
for
which
Southeast
is fair
Asia
enough. Which is
in
fair enough,
America.
It's, I
Americans
sort
don't
of
have,
appreciate both.
don't want to learn about all these different countries. They can just classify as Thai. It makes it easier.
I mean, we're also probably guilty of doing the same thing when we look at Americans, right? So, so it kind of goes both ways. But having said that, I did see a T-shirt once anyway when I think I was in region. I think it wasn't in Laos. It says same but different, and that pretty much it does summarize, right? We're all neighboring countries. We share certain flavors. But having said that, of course, we're all in certain ways unique, and so I probably would say that um, in terms of yeah, how it's classified sometimes as just yeah, just Thailand or Thai, at least in its food. But if anything, it's probably unique in the sense that with along with Indonesia and Brunei, of course, which Brunei used to be part of the Malayan Kingdom of Malaysia. We're probably the only Muslim countries in Southeast Asia, right? And well, majority Muslim, in fact, our neighbors Indonesia is the most populated Muslim country in the world, anyways. And so Indonesia sort of wraps Malaysia and Singapore. It kind of
It's a
protects us.
collection. It's a collection of islands, right? It's
Yes, that's Indonesia. Yeah, it's about 4,000 islands. But the nice thing about Malaysia and Singapore, I guess, is that geographically we're kind of surrounded by Indonesia, so we're kind of safe from all the volcanoes and earthquakes. And that's a fun fact, isn't it?
tightly
So
nestled into Indonesia.
yeah, I guess yeah. And but I mean, come back to Malaysia, which is the point of the conversation. Yeah, it's a unique, very unique country because it's multiculturalism has always been embedded in our history, right? Yes, we are a majority Malay Muslim country, but with a significant Chinese and Indian population, or more Chinese obviously than Indian, and of course we've got our tribes as well that live typically more in East Malaysia, and so you go there and you pretty much find yourself, listening to our unique blend of I like to say Manglish because it's English with peppered with Malay words and Mandarin words, and we kind of switch back and forth like it's a national sport.
So people are speaking English in Malaysia. Is that common over there?
Yeah, more and more so, of course, more in urban areas, right? But it's a form of unique sort of, I like to say even most time broken English, but it's having kind of a pigeon, I think that was formed, over the years, right? And how, switching back and forth between languages and dialects as well, it's just sort of thing that people do, I guess, subconsciously. And then that obviously kind of reflects itself on the food as well, where, if there's one thing that I love selling about Malaysia, it is their food. You not find, I don't think, in any place in the world, I dare to say, a place that has this cuisine that's just got, influences from Chinese, Indian, Malay flavors, just, influence each other, and you've got like a menu that can last you probably years, and restaurants as well that just line the streets everywhere you go, and eating is food is definitely also a national sport apart from a whole language thing. So
I want to dive into what you said earlier about the so most Asian countries kind of have their religious ideals around like Buddhism or Taoism, but like Malaysia and Indonesia are heavily Muslim is the main religion there. Like how does that happen in these Asian countries, but while the rest of the Asian countries are believing something else?
So just skim through a bit of the history, but by no means am I an expert, but from what I learned in primary school and of course over the years is that our first sort of, apart from the aborigines, right, the indigenous people that have been there, and they were there first, right? The ones that came over from Indonesia, right, were Muslim, and so they are the ones that populated Malaysia first. I guess in terms of sort of this mass migration, and therefore becoming the majority, right? And so they're the ones that obviously originated with the whole, religion of Islam.
So the Indonesians came to Malaysia and brought their religion with them.
Yeah, and I think prior to that, I believe that Arab immigrants, Arab merchants, and all came to this part of the world, and therefore then spread, Islam. So that was the case. And then, of course, with the years, you also had, Christian missionaries, especially in East Malaysia, where they normally go to, also spread Christianity. So you've also got a good population of Christians and Catholics there. But, majority, of course, are Muslim, because Malays, they are, interestingly, born automatically Muslim. So, and...
Wait, how's that work? Like you're born and your religion is already...
Yeah, if you're ethnically Malay, due to the fact that your family is Muslim, you're automatically Muslim, and so
there's no Malays like ethnically Malay. There's no ethnically Malay people that don't follow the religion.
Not officially.
That's kind of like saying like all white people have to be Christian. Like so.
Yeah. But then the interesting thing is that if you talk about the Muslim countries in the world, Malaysia has always been classed as, probably the most moderate Muslim country, just because of, again, our multi-ethnic, multi-religious sort of history. And a fun fact as well is that in the Constitution, when the British handed over independence, right, they I think drafted the Constitution, in conjunction with us, right? And there's two specific lines that says that Islam is the official religion of Malaysia. However, Malaysia will remain a secular country. So that has been debated over the years, and it's also obviously protect those non-Muslims around, right? And then of course one last thing was that with the development of the country, the Chinese population has always been economically the more better off sort of
Yeah.
stronger population. So there's always been this you know tension and contrast between the I guess powerful I guess economically speaking, right, powerful Chinese population, which accounts for about I think 25% of the country, as opposed to the majority Malay-led government, obviously since independence, right? So there's
So is
always
there a
been
lot
this.
of animosity between the
Um,
two ethnic groups there?
there has been. I mean, we've had an instance
Wait, I
for
guess going back,
example.
like how did the Chinese end up in? Because
Uh,
you're Chinese
yes, yes.
ethnically, and so how did your family and how did most Chinese people end up in Malaysia?
It's probably the same as with Chinese people all around the world. Like these, overseas Chinese that we see everywhere, including you, right? They came over for for business, for work, to find a better living, right? So my great grandparents, well, grandparents on my dad's side and great grandparents on my mom's side actually came down, uh, you know, on a boat probably, and yeah, came over to look for business opportunities, to earn a better living, right? And I don't know if the intention was ever to come just for a while and go back, because apparently a lot of Chinese people actually had that in mind as well. But obviously, like we're seeing, a lot of them actually ended up staying, and yeah, and they also were from the south, just like your family was, from south of China. I mean,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
So the Chan family came over to Malaysia, let's say in early 1900s, and
yes.
then they just came there to start selling something or like start a business.
My mom's well, my great grandparents on my mom's side, probably did some form of um, you know, find some sort
Chinese
of
herbs.
form of work. I would say I just let my grandparents on my mom's side, yeah, like my grandpa worked in a shoe factory, I believe. My grandma, just took care of the kids. Whereas my dad's side, though, I'm more clear about, because my grandparents on my dad's side actually opened a business in my dad's village. Yeah, I think it's actually called, literally in Malay, Lima Kedai, which is 5 shops. And luckily, he actually owned one of those 5 shops. My dad's dad. So and then he gambled all that money away, and he yeah, yeah,
What was
that
the
was the story.
business? Was it a casino?
It was a sundry shop, like just provisions and stuff. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely not a casino. You would have gambled all the money away anyways. But yeah, and so same thing. I think like in a lot of the Chinese people around the world, they just kind of move for
So,
better
so
living.
both sides of your mom and dad's family ended up in Malaysia, and they're originally from China. Is it typical for Chinese people in Malaysia to just marry each other? They don't want to marry the other ethnicities.
Good, wow, beautiful point. Because of course, most of the time, yeah, they stuck to their own,
I mean
race.
that happens in every country too. I'm like except I mean like in America it's a little bit changing now. You
Yeah,
see more interracial
definitely,
couples, but like I mean like you're just comfortable that way, and it's culturally
definitely.
the same in pretty much every country.
There's that, and I mean it's also because you talk about race, but it's more about culture, and with the religious aspect as well. Malaysia having that weight, it probably also made it complicated to marry interracially. However, they were in the marriages as well, actually, between Malaysian and Chinese. So you actually have this what they call a Nyonya Baba population, where you see Chinese people look like us, but dressed like Malays, live
Yeah.
in Malay-looking houses with their fetishes, and they'll eat halal food. They are culturally kind of more Malay, I think, than Chinese. So that's quite interesting. And the food is again exceptional.
Yeah, the fusion is always nice. But you said like the Chinese are better off than the Malays. Like, did they?
Generally,
So like, did your parents' generation or your grandparents' generation move here, and they just had more business opportunities than the ethnic Malays? Like, because you said your family started their own business. Is that something that's just not as common for the ethnic
um,
Malays?
I wouldn't say more, because I was definitely maybe it's just a function of population, but probably there's a lot more Malay businesses as well. And I think if anything, the stereotype is that they're a lot more industrious than Chinese people in terms of starting businesses. But at the same time, I think that it's probably partly due to expertise and to business and to commerce, that I think the Chinese population, not just in Malaysia, but actually really, really anywhere you go, they've been really good at doing, just setting up business and actually prospering in those
Or could
businesses,
it be
right?
like the Chinese people that did end up in Malaysia, like to come to Malaysia, you need some money, like you need like like you have like a business attitude, and that's why you moved to Malaysia because you wanted to start your business. That's why you left China in the first place. So you have some
I,
family wealth there.
I can only hypothesize. I knew that they didn't come with much, or if not a lot. That's all. Because I know that I think it was really just from my parents' generation, especially how I still remember how my parents said they had to, to borrow money to even, go overseas to study and be the first, I guess, in their family to do that. So like, it's only sort of from then that we kind of saw, I guess, wealth being able to be accumulated. But then that also accounts, I think, for most Chinese people around in Malaysia. But I know that from our grandparents' time, nah, they're still poor, living in
Okay.
tin cabin houses, and plaster wall houses and stuff. Um, so yeah, no, I think it's maybe people always credit them for their industriousness, for their work ethic and everything. And I think that kind of, maybe runs in a bit in our, DNA a bit. It's sort of these values that passed down. So and yeah,
So
so
so you grew up in Malaysia. Like, did you grow up in a city or like or a village or like
yeah.
how does that work?
Oh no, we yeah, I'm a city boy. We grew up in the city. Well, in the residential areas. I guess outside of the city actually, half an hour away from the city. Um, and then for a few years later on, I think the last few years of my primary school years, we moved into the city. Yeah. But, for the village, we just go back more during Chinese New Year. you know.
So,
Um,
so the village is just like where your parents are from, not
yeah.
where you live,
Yeah.
right?
No, no, yeah, we grew up in a residence, like in a suburb, sort of, middle upper class, well, between sort of half an hour away from the city center of Johor, which is just, right in the southern tip of Malaysia, just opposite Singapore. Yeah.
So, is a village like what like Americans would stereotypically think of villages, like something without like electricity or running water? Or is it like describe what a village is?
I guess it's all about levels, right? Because if you were to go deep into the villages, especially the more the Malay villages, you might still have certain things that people take for granted in this modern first world um, context that we often live in now. But I'll say now though, luckily enough, most villages actually are, I guess, supplied, in terms of electricity and water. I know that, for example, in my dad's village, his neighbor had a well in their house, so fucking lucky people. But if anything, when I was young, when we used to go there, yeah, even not even in the village actually, in my own house as well, we'd have power outages, every now and then. Luckily, water supply would still be all right, but we still every house would have sort of the tank up above the house that collects hot water, well, water that I guess gets
What it
heated up.
literally collects water from like the sky?
I'd say so, yeah. Uh, and so obviously, with the years, right, and with technology and then people getting, more well off, being able to modernize, that's been sort of phased out, right? But yeah, I mean, you can still find like villages that probably, that still lack the comforts that most of us have gotten used to now.
So
But of
so
course, more and more
houses would
so.
literally like like have some mechanism to collect the water that comes from rain, and then you use that water for your dishes and stuff.
Yeah, some villages probably still have a well system where they have to go and collect water and or have sort of um, I guess maybe either the communal wells or I guess or water sort of outlets, that people go and fill up their water, canisters and bottles in. But I would say again that's probably more and more of a minority now because, luckily speaking, most of the country is probably modernized enough to guarantee that each house would have their own uh, you know water system that's reliable enough. And power, well, power is also generally I think okay, but yeah, again, so you still find pockets of the population that probably lack the reliability, if anything,
Mhm.
of getting electricity. You get power outages here every now and then. It's you know just
So
depending
okay, so
on
you grew up in like the suburbs of like the main city. Did
yeah.
you when you went to school, is there a good public school system, or does everyone have to just go to private school if you're a Malay?
Uh, that's the thing. I think that also is a reflection of a lot of the, probably the most, if not all, of the world's developing countries, right? In that I was lucky enough to go to a private primary school, um, but of course, it's also because yeah, if you have the means, you definitely, you know, I guess unfortunately would like to have your kid get a better quality education, and you probably have a better chance of getting that in private school, right? Because most government schools, like in really any, might even say any country really, developing, generally more crowded, they have bigger classroom numbers, fewer resources, and of course it comes with the stereotype that teachers as well who teach in public schools aren't as well paid, right? And maybe also aren't as well, if I may say, I don't know, trained in some cases
Yeah, not as
compared to private school
qualified.
teachers. Yeah.
Do you so you went to private school? Did you ever see what a public school looked like in
Yeah,
Malaysia?
and I'm also lucky, obviously, to have
Was
played
it like
football again.
way more
Football
crowded
is
class or like way worse
so.
building?
To give you an example, like we had about an average 18 students in our class, whereas government schools would have probably double times right the number, 30 plus, right? And then of course with facilities as well, that like although I must say though, ironically we had way smaller football field because in private schools people or parents would obviously pressure us to put our studies first. But luckily enough, I had a teacher. And we played football a lot, being an actual sport and everything. We had a team, and our teacher came from the government school system. Actually, a lot of them did anyways, and they then got jobs in our private school. And so he brought us to play, football matches against government school kids all the time. And then we saw that we actually got to live and see how well the conditions were, and how they would look at our boots, Nike, Adidas boots, and look with NBA, and we're like, oh shit, we feel so bad here, like, and of course,
That's
these
when
are
a young
majority based.
Jonathan realized class struggle.
Yeah, no, I actually, yeah. And then when I made the district team, I was like, I was the only Chinese boy on the team, and I'm like, wow, this is a different world, where they actually would come to football practice, right, to have their breakfast because coaches would bring the food for breakfast, and you're like, well, a lot of them actually wouldn't have breakfast at home, and so
Yeah.
that was an eye opener from an early age. Yeah.
So you went to a private school, and I guess it's obviously people that have the means to go there. So if you don't have the means, you end up in public school. Is your future really disadvantaged if you entered the public school system?
Yeah, I guess it's all relative. It depends on the means that your family would have to maybe acquire, like saying to private classes, if and they need, like that's also what a lot of people do anyways, because obviously there's just a few private schools compared to the government schools around. So a lot of times people actually supplement your lessons that might be lacking in government school classes with private tuition. Although otherwise, I would say no. I mean, you're disadvantaged. I don't know. I would say in terms of course, getting a quality education compared to private schools, but it's definitely not sort of impossible. I mean, you still have to. You probably have to obviously work a lot harder. But I think more and more so the system is hopefully anyways improving, if I say, and so you won't be as disadvantaged, I would say. But then of course, in conclusion, I still can't deny that private school kids obviously have better outlooks, right?
Yeah, because I mean, this is common in America too. Because if you go to a poor public school, like you're just at a bigger disadvantage, and you're less likely to go to a good college and stuff, and you're not going to have a great job when you graduate. Do you think that problem is better or worse in Malaysia, like the class divide?
Well, compared to the States, compared to you guys.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Like it's like it's like not having money at a young age, like the same death sentence as, well, it's not a death sentence, but it's very hard to get out of that situation in America. But even as hard as you work, like you probably end up working hard in a job that doesn't pay that much. But like in Malaysia, do you think there's a better chance of getting out of poverty?
Well, I would say that I think like with any developing country, I would say, well, I mean, it's all about scales, isn't it? So I think for our case, for Malaysia's case, anyways, I think we've probably seen a fair amount of opportunity for social mobility, right, over the years, over the generation. So it's getting better and better. So in terms of you going to a government school, and here's the caveat: in the city or or in a bigger, more urbanized context, I think your chances are still pretty good if you were to graduate from the government school system. You can still access, a good education afterwards, right, and good sort of jobs, right. Although having said that, we still really haven't talked about the I guess the racial tension as well that exists, in the education system as well, because yeah,
Is there a
just a bit
preference
of
for
history
Chinese people?
so for example, to enter the university system, right, there has always been a quota that says that I think 80% of places are for ethnic Malay students, and 20 for minorities. Oh, sorry, it was I think 90% and 10%, if I'm not mistaken. But
There's a
then that's
literal
why, like,
quota
yeah.
for how many Malays are supposed to go to
So if we
like
look
your
at actual
top university.
national universities, right? But having said that as well, again, I've not always been, up to date with the changes that have been. But from last time I checked, that was the case. To get the sort of the post, secondary school, university sort of entrance, right? And that's why you see, a lot of people, there's non-Malays or even Malays themselves, if they have the means, they probably like, try to go to Australia if anything, or if you're, more well off, maybe UK. um, but what I can say is that it's because of the history that goes back to even our parents' generation that had English being, the medium of our education system. And then, with I don't know if you know this guy called Dr. Mahathir. He's our longest serving prime minister. I think he was the fourth, and then he came back as the seventh. Anyways,
I'm
he,
American, man. I don't even know the Prime Minister of Canada. No, that's not true. I know.
it's just because he might have been famous because he had this interesting policy back then called the Look East policy. He was inspired by Japan, right, and how they didn't need the English medium to advance that well that they've done so, and he changed everything to the Malay medium, and then it caused a lot of debate, obviously, between the Malays and us non-Malays. So having us being put in a disadvantage, I guess, not being our first language, right? And then after that, they switched it back for science and maths, and then they switched it back again, and they've been going back and forth, between the Malay and English medium.
So you're talking about the college admission system is
I'm
based.
talking about the school system in general, from primary to secondary school. And
Okay.
so, but in terms of the quota, that is in effect in the higher education system, right, for national universities.
So national universities benefit ethnically Malay people.
Yeah.
But you said before that Chinese people have the most money in Malaysia. Is that to combat the income disparity, to like even it out, to give the Malay kids more of a chance when applying for college?
That's the idea. That's the idea, of course, that throughout the history that Malays have always been, socioeconomically, I guess, disadvantaged, right, compared to Chinese. I mean, we haven't really talked about the Indians, but those are kind of a mixed bag. But yeah, generally speaking, that has been the rationale behind that, to account for their historically sort of disadvantaged situation, right? But there's also been a lot of debate because on one hand, people say that over the generations that hasn't produced the intended effect, that we've seen very sort of, if anything, slow economic mobility upwards. It's kind of been more of a crutch, and it's been politically racialized as well all the time. And you see that all the time in politics.
Yeah,
on the other hand,
this is a big issue in America too. Like it's called affirmative action here.
Yeah.
And so the problem with it in America is that it doesn't help the people that you're trying to help. It helps like the more wealthier minority class because they have the means to like go to a good public school. Maybe they have the means to get a laptop. They don't have like tough homes, so it's easier for them to study. Is that what is happening in Malaysia too? Like it's only helping like the richer Malaysians get into college.
The interesting thing is that from what I've seen anyways, the richer ones, I guess, probably don't rely on the system because they head overseas, they send their kids overseas, for better education as soon as they can, with the means, right? But you definitely see that. I don't know if their parents maybe benefit from that system, and if they did, the assumption maybe from the outside would be that they benefit, their own, brothers and sisters, that they kind of that it will go back into the Malay community. But in terms of that, I don't know if we've seen that much. I think it's more like what you said, that the more well-off ones, the elites, right, will keep
like it might help the middle class, but it's not helping the really disadvantaged class that needs it the most.
Probably not as well, not as fast, if anything, because we're seeing, if anything, a drop in standards, like a drop in, for example, grading systems and exams, and we're seeing probably again not as efficient of a system that would lift them up, a lot faster than that we hoped. So yeah, that's sort of what's happened. And so it continues to be a debate, but at the same time, generally speaking, though, I'd say we are seeing slow improvement. I'd say, if anything, to be fair, I guess, to both sides. Yeah.
So you touched on something really interesting that I think happens in a lot of smaller countries. The people with the most resources end up leaving the country to study abroad into something that a country that has better education. Do they come back to Malaysia after they get their education, or do they like it so much in like let's say London or Australia or whatever they go to?
That's the thing. I would say that I think a good majority of them still eventually come back, and so I think that's maybe still justifies their move, I guess, to go overseas, get better education, come back to benefit and contribute to their own country. But having said that, there I think is a growing population, and I mean guilty as charged, right, of people that move and remain, right, and build a better life and have a better quality of life, overseas for a bunch of reasons, because obviously it's hard to kind of summarize, why people do that, why they come back. You got family, you got of course career, you got might even just be, hey, the food. I don't know. Could be a lot of things. But to answer your question, I think generally most people still do come back if anything. And I know that, for example, government scholarships that are on offer, they actually have a lot of Malaysian students actually. I think in general they take advantage of the scholarships, but the clause is that you have to come back and work for the government or for, I think a Malaysian business or something for a good say 5 years or so. And so these clauses that have people come back.
So they'll give you a scholarship to move to like a different country, but you have to come back and work for the government.
Yeah. And these government scholarships exist and they're quite renowned. And also one other thing is that a lot more of these overseas university campuses are now sort of being established in Malaysia, so you can actually get an overseas degree. I think with same syllabus and everything, but in Malaysia, so at a cheaper rate and as well as at a cheaper price. You don't have to move, right? And some of them do half of the degree first in Malaysia and then go overseas and finish it in that partnering twinning universities, what they call it. So these things are opening up, and so it's helping.
So yeah, I guess I wanted to understand if you are like a more wealthy person, and then you find attraction in leaving Malaysia, does that mean that Malaysia gets less money in the future if more and more of its richer citizens leave the country?
Less money in terms of less input from these people?
So the rich people typically are the ones making the businesses and everything.
Right.
So if they're consistently leaving because they find a better life in an English-speaking country in London or in Australia or whatever, does that cause the country? So have you noticed that the country is having less money or more money throughout the years?
I have to look up the stats on GDP growth in the last years or so, but I'll say that if I'm not mistaken, it's still been on the rise. I don't know by how much, right? But having said that, it is true that we've experienced a brain drain over the last decades, right? So that is definitely something that's been happening though, and so in terms of, I don't know, if you were to sort of hypothesize the projected or the imagined sort of wealth contribution that these guys that have graduated overseas that could have had in Malaysia, of course it would have been so much more. But we see that most of the Malaysian exiles, no, I'm kidding, migrants, I guess, that end up settling overseas. It's no surprise that most of them are people like South Malaysian Chinese people, Malaysian Indians, and it's because race is still a huge factor, I think, in the politics of our country. And we're seeing progress in that sense, more representation, sort of more Malaysian-centered instead of race-centered politics. But it's still something that has to be negotiated. And hopefully, with our generation, the ones coming after, we get more of a sort of a fairness, right? So in that sense, hopefully, then more people will actually want to come back and not sort of see themselves as my parents used to say second-class citizens and therefore look overseas as soon as they can, you know.
So growing up as I guess you're 20% of the population Chinese people. Like I guess you're
25, yeah, more than I think 20, almost 30 now. So yeah.
I guess you can call that a minority. Did you experience a lot of problems being a minority in Malaysia?
So see, so the interesting thing of it all intertwines right now with race, culture, and language. So luckily for me, growing up, in this private school setting, we all spoke English to each other. So and I also speak English at home, and that was a choice I think that my parents instilled. Well, my mom was supposed to do the Chinese part, but she kind of failed there. But yeah.
Ni hao.
So, huh?
I'm sorry, I was busting out my Chinese.
Yo, yeah, we gotta talk about that next time. But no, yeah. So we all communicated in English with each other, so it kind of erased that sort of that race factor, or I guess it can give place for any kind of discrimination that could have happened. But having said that, of course, yeah, being Chinese, you still get that, especially yeah, the time when I was like in the deepest, in the midst of the my Malay folks, my government school football friends, right? And yeah, I definitely got a good deal of good old Chinese racism there. And surprisingly enough as well, I mean, I can still remember how the adults also were in upon it. They also laughed and everything. So like that was a different experience. And I remember also, yeah, how they, look at my name and say, hey, what the hell? Is this like a Japanese name? And like, whoa. I'm like, I live just a few kilometers that way. And just
They
because,
thought Chan was a Japanese last name.
yeah, I mean, they just never really had that exposure. So hopefully, again, we're more and more, I think integrated now. But definitely as a minority, yeah, you definitely would get, racist jokes here and there. But I would say that, it wasn't too huge a deal just because I think my socialization was mainly around, sort of more, I guess, I don't know, English speaking people, right? And if you actually were to ask people now, there's this divide as well, actually, with Malaysians, having this sort of more, I hate to say this word, but maybe westernized way of thinking and communicating, speaking English and everything, and those that, either are envious or just don't see that, that's necessary and kind of like, then, don't really kind of, I guess gel, with the former. Like,
So Malaysia has such a Western influence because the English colonized them, right?
That from history speaking, yeah, like so everything you see, around you, supposed to be in English. Well, more there's a big presence of that, anyways. But also just I think like with a lot of countries out there, man, just culturally speaking, the Americans, with their movies and their music, you guys definitely culturally, affected. I mean, exported well. So because of that as well, we watch your movies and listen to your music all the time, more and more so, and therefore that also kind of plays into it, right?
Yeah.
And English is always sorry.
Wait. So when did it get independence from England?
1957. So
Oh, that's
quite young
really
country.
recent. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
only
and
that's
so
within a lifetime.
yeah, it was during the anti-colonization sort of period. A lot of countries achieved independence. And I was just gonna say the last thing was that English has always and is always going to be, I think, even more so, right? A way of just attaining better opportunities, right? Of moving upwards, socioeconomically. So as long as you have English, man, many doors open to you, right? So and therefore, yeah, you have more people obviously taking an interest to having to have their kids speak English, do better at that.
So you said like Western American movies is a pretty big influence in Malaysia,
Yes.
and I assume that it kind of seems well because so many of the population already spoke English because there's a whole history of like being owned by England, and then people learn English so they can enjoy American culture. But so what I want to know is American culture censored though? Because you also said that it's a 60% Muslim country. So do you have like are certain websites banned because they might not be great for Muslim like the Muslim community? Are certain
Yes.
movies banned? Like how's that work?
Yeah, and see that I guess a good point because that also brings up the whole conundrum again that comes to do with race and even more so religion, right? And Malaysia is not I guess an exception to the rule of how Muslim countries are generally becoming more and more. I don't know. I don't want to say. Let's just say more and more Muslim Islamified. I don't know. Like there's more of an emphasis now on
Are you
coming
just
back
trying
to
to
the
say
roots and
conservative?
yes, yeah, that's probably the best word, conservative. So I know that I think in the last decade, probably well, I think it must have been 10 years ago already, right? They banned all pornographic websites. Of course, there's some that probably would still be able to get access. People use the VPN and stuff. Sorry if the government's hearing this, but yeah, they banned porn just because obviously it's not it's immoral. And in terms of movies and stuff, uh, the scenes that involve sex, it's all censored, so they cut them out. In terms of songs, vulgar words are censored out. So I can cite an example actually. Hold on, the back that piece. Remember that song, "Don't Funk with My Heart"?
Funk, yeah. Don't
They
funk.
had they had the they had on the version "Don't Mess with My Heart." So "Don't Mess with My Heart" was played all around.
Oh,
uh,
that makes it fun for the whole family, so that's fine. They probably
yeah,
wouldn't like the
right.
new Cardi B song though.
Yeah, in that case, that'll be censored. A lot of just pauses in the
Just a
songs,
bunch
right?
of bleeps, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of silences. But but again, having said that, like you still have that market there. So I think it's all relative. If you compare us to say I don't know, like say Saudi Arabia, which is the other, which is the extreme probably, right? No, we're probably not at that level. I mean, definitely not at that level. We still have tons of Western media. It's just maybe some parts.
So what happens to like a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, like, and he's interested in Western media, but like there's so much that's censored. Could they just get a VPN to
But that's the thing. Like
watch
I don't know if
movies
I'm
and
making
stuff?
out the same that there's a lot, but actually isn't. That's not not that much at all. It's just obviously like you said, like, just the sex scenes, vulgarity. But after that though, you get pretty much the same deal. I mean, and of course, I mean, if you want to access all kinds of like um, stuff in detail, right? Yeah, you can just go online, and there are always ways. And so that's not too much of a like a stringent, check there. That's you're still pretty much free to to access your way.
So what happens to like a Malaysian kid? Like, so if you don't grow up with full internet access, like I guess porn is like literally banned for you. Does that cause any differences in your adolescence?
uh, I think it's a common trend in developing countries is that there's one thing about you know um, mandating something and this in principle, but and in practice, right, about actually sort of implementing it and actually maintaining such rules. That's a whole different story. So again, with like say porn, for example, man, now people still access porn. People still even upload. I dare to say even like
They're
stuff
passing
and
around USB disk around or
no, I mean no, they their VPNs and people aren't that stringent in terms of um, checking and everything. So I think the only thing that, if anything, catches maybe more media attention of the authorities being more stringent about is probably again focused on the Muslim Malay population, right? About premarital sex and everything. About how for example, I had a mate and his partner. Back then they were obviously dating, right? So um, they're not allowed to be seen like just alone, just the two of them, and because they run the risk of having the religious police coming around to just check, right? And they actually do these spot checks on hotels, actually.
but
Just
there's
up
actually a
north.
religious police, like a
Yeah,
police designated for the Muslim Malay population.
yes, and there's a Sharia court and everything. Although you see, it doesn't get too much attention, and it's obviously because it's got some specific, right, who they're targeting, but they exist, and so. But the funny thing is that they aren't allowed to actually break in to a hotel room. They can knock on the door, and that's about it. Like so. But yeah, this happens, right? And so I used to be that guy that hang out with my mate and his partner just to make it seem as if we were all hanging out between friends, right? But it's just an anecdote. But yeah, if anything, I think they're under more of the focus, more of the spotlight, the Malay population in terms of how I don't know limited quote unquote they might be in expressing their certain freedoms.
So you're saying that there's actually a police that only focuses on Muslims and making sure
Yeah,
they follow the Muslim law. Like you can't be alone with your partner.
yeah.
So
But
like
again,
a Chinese person
that's
could be holding hands with his girlfriend,
yeah,
renting out. and that's totally fine.
Yep. And dress codes as well.
So there's a completely double standard in the country.
That's just the way it is because I guess
So
Islam
what if
has.
you're ethnically Malay and you don't believe in Islam? Like, are you just shit out of
Interesting
luck?
question.
Like you have to? Like what's gonna happen?
Interesting question because there was a historical case, right, of this woman that wanted to opt out. I guess wanted to um, just not be Muslim. So there is a process. I think is it called to become an apostate or something. I think she managed it in the end after a long legal hurdle, and it was a long process and everything. But
Like you get to
having said that,
legally
so
change your religion through a court.
yeah, but it's tough, and I think they can make it tough as well, and it's also really unpopular, and it's also taboo, and so it's probably not really explored, I think, by people generally. It's just that the way that happens is that if you're not really, I guess, a so-called devout or sort of super loyal sort of Muslim, I guess the more and more of the younger people of our generation and the younger ones as well that happen to to do that, and to be honest, if I can say, they kind of get away with it. I mean, there's not too much. See, I think I might be contradicting myself when I say that there's more and more of a sort of an emphasis on these religious police making sure that more Muslims are following the rules and such. But at the same time, I think it's maybe more in the extreme cases in terms of maybe intermarital. Oh, sorry, premarital sex. But in terms of I don't know, not wearing the hijab, for example, you see plenty of Malay girls that do. In terms of I don't know, this I guess light uh, infringements. People kind of close an eye, and so that's why I'm trying to say that in terms of you're going to compare how moderate this country is in terms of being a Muslim country with the others. Malaysia is probably, I must say, probably the most moderate. To cite other examples, I mean, you get some Malays that that are exploring exploring that are trans, and you see them as well. They're obviously not represented and also kind of marginalized, but there are more and more of them, and you usually get them Malays as well. A lot of them that drink, um, but of course
So
I'm
they're
not trying to
allowed
say
to
that
drink. Like so what
they're
I'm
not.
confused about is like if they're not like they can't go to a
No.
so like if I go to a Malay bar, if I'm in Kuala Lumpur and I go to a bar, I'm Chinese, so like I
Yeah,
could buy a beer. It's
of
cool.
course.
But the guy on the street that's Malay, like the bartender can't serve him.
I guess that depends on the place, right? Technically, no. Technically,
Yeah.
no.
Okay.
But
And
then
that's
of
and it's
course,
solely because of his ethnicity. It's not because of his. Well, I guess like if you're that ethnicity, then you're automatically Muslim, as you said at the beginning
yeah.
of the conversation.
Yeah. But having said that, again, you have you have some that I guess are able to access alcohol, and it depends, I guess, on the place and but I guess more importantly is that I think it probably happens more in urban sort of places, right? So yeah, Kuala Lumpur, where I'm from, JB. Because obviously with cities, I think it's probably the same in the states as well, right? You get more of a diversity and more of a not just more people to take care of, but also just more of an openness, right? In terms of mindset. Whereas if you go to the more rural areas, yeah, there you get more sort of more fundamental, more devout conservative as Muslims, right? So. But hey, if you don't want to worry about all this, if you're a Muslim, just go to Singapore, man. You're all good there, I think.
So so does that cause like a lot of like you have Malay friends, and then like you could
Yeah.
literally go to a bar and then or you can go to a restaurant and you can order the beer and then you can just like drink it in front of him. Is that
Oh,
is that like insulting because like he can't do that?
so bars are frequented normally by Chinese Indians, right? So that's why the national activity it would more be to go to what's called a mamak, a 24/7 sort of restaurant that are normally run by Muslim Indians, right? Where you eat kind of typical like Rossi foods and you smoke a shisha, you watch the football, and you do that's kind of more of the activity that I guess everyone, all race and religions go to. And fun fact though, I don't want to sort of start this religious tirade, but smoking is supposed to be part of the things that are haram. But hey, they can smoke. Everyone smokes. So yeah.
I mean, this is just fascinating to me because like I get like some Muslim countries like you like the whole country essentially can't drink and they can't be alone with a woman in public if you're not married. But Malaysia is this really weird country where like there's 25% of the population that isn't Muslim, so rules only apply. Like you're literally seeing other people break rule or like yeah do things that you can't legally do because of your ethnicity. Is that the only country like that? I guess
Oh wow,
Indonesia might be like that too.
I mean, oh man, I don't know if other countries have like a dual court system, like a secular one and a Sharia one.
Yeah,
I
this is
actually don't
crazy.
know.
This sounds like segregated U.S. 1960s, where there's different laws for black people and there's different laws than white people. But this is
It's
happening in 2020.
yeah. But having said that, you see, again, I guess not, well, one not being underground, and two, also not being Muslim. I just can't be sort of 100% sure on how effective or how strict the Sharia court system and the religious police. I know that they're in effect, right? They are there. I just don't know see how kind of strongly they enforce these things. And so I think most of the time people are still viewed as liable, let's say for like court proceedings to be sued, in the secular one, I'd say, because if it really just, I think if it's supposed to be so specific to Muslims, then I think only would they invoke the Sharia court. But having said that, like I think it's also that you see because of our sort of um, our sort of context where we have like I said 20 something percent Chinese and then 10% Indians, and so it's quite a distinct significant minority if you want to put it like that, right? That is not part of this, right? So that kind of gives you a lot of clout, and also doesn't I guess pull the whole country sort of one way where you see I don't know, for example, in I don't know, yeah, Saudi Arabia, for example, where everyone's Muslim, right? So it's I guess a different context. So I think we can afford that diversity, and we know how important it is as well, and so we probably are lucky in that sense that because of that we don't have to share too much to the extreme in terms of religion, right?
What is the punishment for like drinking a beer if you're Malay, ethnically
Oh,
Malay?
yeah, I
Is it
forgot.
like actually jail or is it a fine?
No, it's jealous. He has maybe I don't do like probably I don't know have sodomy, which is what our old prime minister accused his deputy and his opposition challenger at the time of having done, and so put him in jail for sodomy. And that's actually that archaic law is still part of the constitution.
So you wait. So this goes crazier. So like you can be gay if you're Chinese in Malaysia, but you can't be gay if you're Malay,
um,
or can you not be gay either way?
technically that's it. But um, see, being gay, I don't think is part of is like actually explicitly stated. But sodomy is for some reason it's still there. So that is an offense.
Wait,
Sodomy.
so sodomy is a national law or just a Muslim
It's a
law?
national it's a national law. So
National.
that's yeah. So that's interesting, right? Oh, it's sad. And then the other thing was sedition, which is also one of those. I guess sounds like the law that the Chinese government has put in Hong Kong now, right? Sedition is also part of constitution. So if you were to do anything that's seditious towards the government, you can be charged, you can be jailed. But and the other fun fact, I don't know, fun, sorry, no, it's just a fact, yeah. The
It's
death
not that
sentence is
fun for
still
gay people in Malaysia, that's for
no,
sure.
the death sentence is still legal, so they still do it by by hanging, by caning. Caning is still legal as well.
Caning to death? Oh, you mean
Oh, not to death. Not
just hanging?
caning is legal, yeah. And to death, that I think hanging is still the way they do that.
Jeez, that's tough. Is it like a public display?
No, no.
Okay.
So again, in terms of I think social progress, yeah, we're still progressing, but yeah, but again, I think it's again because of the I guess the national makeup that built on this sort of multicultural, multi-religious sort of framework that makes it so that I don't think we ever go to that extreme because also owing to the fact that we talk about how we're more one of the more westernized, modernized sort of countries. So like you know, um, I think yeah, I think we well touch wood we won't have to ever sort of see these extreme cases, right? people just.
I'm really glad we had this conversation because I came in here like knowing nothing about Malaysia or like very little about Malaysia. I knew what the capital was because I looked that up before the show, but but now I know like it has one of the most interesting dynamics of populations in the world. Like it's literally a country with two different laws for two different ethnic groups. So I guess the last question I'll ask you is like, what do you want to see in the future for Malaysia?
Right. So yeah, on actually specifically, you kind of answered that question for me on the last thing that you said. I mean, I must say that as a sort of a disclaimer, I think it's not as stark, I think it's really just in the cases of specific, I don't know, Muslim specific maybe topics and offenses that the Sharia court might be involved, blah blah blah. But most of the time, we still have, I guess, in our minds that we're all judged under the same law. So I'm just gonna have to maybe clarify that. But in terms of what I like to see, oh man, definitely like I think with a lot of countries out there that are facing this problem with multiculturalism. I mean, they have faced this problem maybe for years, and I think we talked about this as well. Just a greater I think effort to properly integrate. Like when I say to integrate, to actually do that in practice. Not just sort of I just talk about it, but actually for example, for one thing that I like to see would be to have more of this overlapping discussions about, let's say, Islam, right? Not just within Muslims, and but actually have the non-Muslims also kind of being part of the discussion, right, and to engage in that, to understand what's happened, right, and likewise as well, and not just sort of know that, oh, okay, we're celebrating Chinese New Year now, oh, we're celebrating Deepavali now, okay, that's the only thing that we know about other people's cultures and religions, but actually kind of have a more of an engagement and participation. I think that's what I really hope, And
are your representatives like from different ethnic groups? Like, are they Chinese or are they all Malay?
Yeah, it's still a Malay majority, and so the latest until the shenanigans that happened in the past few months with the with the prime minister stepping down and the whole restructuring of the government. Before that, in the last election, anyways, the opposition won for the first time since independence, right? So in 60 years or so. There was a case against corruption, and of course that's also of course one of the main things that I think everyone hopes for, with weeding out corruption. But when the opposition won, that was the most diverse government that we've seen ever since we had independence, right? So of course more of a representative government. That's what we all want. That's what we all hope for. But I would say it really starts from the ground up. I would say from our education system, from from our upbringing, just to have more of a.
So when you say like the younger generation is more likely to interact, like if you're a Malay, you're more likely to interact with a Chinese person or Indian person.
With more and more of course, with more and more of urbanization, right? That definitely is the propelling factor, right? And so obviously I'm hoping also for the same. And with the internet, I think that's really democratizing a lot, right? And exposing us to a lot of difference. But I really hope for that to be happening on the ground. So yeah, that's my biggest hope, man. To see more mixing and more, I don't know, meaningful understanding and empathy right across.
Did you say when you were young that like were the schools segregated, or like did you have everybody?
So yes, that's a good point. That's a good point, because still now we have this, in a nutshell, a school system that comprises the national public school system, right? Which is technically open for everyone. And we still have this vernacular school system that was built, that was established in the past, where you have like a Chinese medium public school or like a Tamil medium public school. That was to preserve the languages of the minorities right back then. But now people are kind of debating against that, because on one hand, that's what our parents and grandparents hoped for, right? That we wouldn't forget our medium. But on the other hand, it kind of is just segregating, isn't it? It's really just dividing.
So are most of the public schools like literally just Malay kids go here and just Indian kids go here, just Chinese kids go there, or is it mixed?
Gradually less and less, but still, I think for the most part, it's still like that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, and then of course, and the proponents as well for English, right, being it should be the language instead of Malay, but I'm sorry, being the sort of national language, if anything, unofficially, but that's all kinds of debates that people are having about. But yeah, I think can I ask you the same question then? What about you for for the States, like for your for where you are? What's your biggest hope?
My biggest hope for the states is just we have
Oh,
more empathy for each other, which I think
right.
just that just involves like getting to know each other a little bit more,
Yeah.
just like Malaysian people. If you're a young Malaysian person, just try to start hanging out with the other group. It
Yeah.
sounds like pretty segregated there.
Yeah. We're in this universal fight, and yeah. So it gives me hope when I see more of that mixing now, like proper mixing. Because it really plays out how you see in our business and our politics, right? So yeah, we're in the same fight, man.
All right, man. So on that note, we're gonna end the show. Thank you, Jonathan, for speaking to us. And until next time, this has been Jono.